Da-da! So welcome in this episode of African Spirituality. So today I want to dive a little bit more, a little bit deeper into animal totems and the reason why in Africa traditionally we don't have pets. And as you will see in the title that says, why caged birds don't sing, is part of the principle why we don't have pets, why we don't consider animals our pets. It comes from that symbiotic relationship. So if you go watch my video on African animal totems, and where I discuss how you can create a symbiotic relationship with certain animals, where you can embody certain physical characteristics, certain aspects of that animals, and be able to have a relationship with that animals and that family of species of a particular animal, where then you have access to certain knowledge. You are able to, let's say, to telepathically be able to communicate with that animal. You are able to receive information from them. They are able to come to you and warn you of certain things. You are able also to go to them for help. And they can manifest in your life in many kind of ways to warn you, to discuss with you. And especially if you continue with that type of relationship, you can get to a level where you are actually able to physically change yourself into that animal. And your parents, if you do have that ability, that parents can transmit that information to the children. And you can find many people who have many African totems because they inherited, because it is already part of their blood, because the knowledge has been acquired, kept, and transmitted. Sometimes you may have all of the different African totems already in your family, but you're not aware because you haven't explored that facet, or because no one in your generation or the previous generation wasn't aware of all that information being there. And for many of them, they may confuse that with animal spirits or with familiars, or with the fact that you may have a random animal bringing you some information, or bringing you some having some activities, which is very different from African totems. The African totems, animal totems, is really something that's really specific. It's not just an animal that's around you, that's helping you and that's nice to you. It's really a symbiotic relationship. Sometimes it gets to the level where when that animal is being harmed, you are also feeling that pain. That's how deep it gets. So to get into this video about why in our African spirituality we don't consider animals to be pets, meaning if you take the aspect of the Western society and what it means to have a pet, first of all, it's an animal that you bought from a store, that you bought from a place, or that you got from a shelter, and whom you're considered to be the owner, meaning that no one else can go basically interact with this animal without your consent, without you authorizing that. This animal most of the time is confined to stay within your home, within your place. The animal cannot come and go and leave and disappear for months or years and come back. It's basically, the animal is in an environment that's controlled, that's set with boundaries and with rules about when the animal needs to go out, come back in. Certain rules also in terms of the animal having behavior modification in order to accommodate living in your quarters, living with you. And I mean, we can get into the cats and how cats are really have a lot less behavior modification than other pets, but it is kind of quite the same. So long the animal is not free to go wherever he wants to go, or to go and stay with whoever he wants to stay, or disappear, and the animal is also not able any longer to fend for himself. That means that animal, if it was left alone, will not be able necessarily to care for itself or to feed itself if it was, left back in the wilderness. So that perspective of having an animal belong to you, of you dominating that animal, deciding when that animal can reproduce or cannot reproduce, decide what that animal can eat or cannot eat, or drink, or what time is going to be drinking, all the different things. This is really not part of our tradition. Our tradition, especially when you have an animal totem, that animal comes and goes as it please. That animal is not locked into your home or your house. That animal is going to be outside in the wilderness. That animal is going to be able to fetch for himself, and have basically his natural instinct, animal instinct. that animal will cater to you when it wants to cater to you. Otherwise, it could disappear. It can go and hang out with other people. It could go and do a lot of different arrays of things. And that's part of that symbiotic relationship. The same way you, as a human being, you're able to go places and do whatever you please. So in this aspect, this is really how we see the animal totem. It's not an animal you're dominating, because the relationship is symbiotic. As I mentioned, sometimes when that animal gets hurt, you may, depending on how strong your bond is, even feel that hurt. And so in that aspect, there is no ownership. You cannot sell your totem. The totem belongs to you, because the symbiotic relationship is deeper. It's a spiritual one. It's also a lot of time a genetic one, where you cannot pay to get an animal totem. And I think a lot of people have received some messages about, how can you get an animal totem and pay for it and all these different things. And to me, it's like, you can never pay to get an animal totem. Because it is a symbiotic relationship, the animal and his species has to accept you. There has to be some type of agreement between that species and yourself, or your grandparents, or if you already had that in your family. But it's not something that you're gonna go to, I don't know, some type of priest and pay him some type of money, and then you walk out with your tiger, and then your tiger is your animal totem. That's really not how it works. And this is why sometimes it takes years, sometimes it even takes generations after generations in order to create that bond. So it's not something that people will come, let me find a video on YouTube on how to get an animal totem for myself. Because you're not gonna find, and I think even if you find that, it's probably gonna be something that's wrong. At least from my tradition, you can never acquire an animal totem that way. And I think it is somewhat similar to the Native Americans, where you have a whole entire clan that has an animal totem, and that clan has worked generation after generation in order to establish that relationship, in order to preserve it as well and maintain it. So it's not something that some type of foreigner will just come and be able to snatch like that. And I think it is interesting, because sometimes in this fast-paced world, in the YouTube land, people tend to want to have some quick fix. I want this and I want to get it now, without even researching what are the downside of it. Because it's not going to be all you just manipulating animals and doing kind of whatever and having, the tigers working on your back and looking all cool. No, it comes with a lot of responsibility. It always comes with, there's always two sides of a coin and the rain around it. So you always have to wonder if you're really enticed about a specific topic, you always have to wonder about the other side. Because that is really, by knowing the two sides, this is the only way you're going to be ensuring that this is really something you want to get into and you want to go. Because once you establish this relationship, once you're entirely into that responsibility is going to come. And it may not always be, at the most relevant time for you, at the most opportune time. You may have to give up a lot of things in order to do that. So it's not something that's all going to be all perks and, that tiger comes there, I go to the zoo and I do. No, it's like, let's the fantasy and come back down to earth, where the exchange has to be even. This animal is not just, you're not just riding off the animal and the rider, it's really an exchange. So you are going to receive as much as you're giving. And this is how you have to maintain, this is what you have to do in order to maintain that relationship. And so this is really to go a little deeper in terms of saying that for us to see one of your animal totem being caged or being treated as a pet, it's going to hurt. And this is why, I'll say, this is why, cage birds don't sing, because you are basically depriving them of their liberty. It's not that hard to they are not object. They are entities that have, a purpose of being here. And that purpose is not to be subservient. That purpose is not to be made to forget their essence, essentially. Because when I'm talking about an animal being constrained to undergo behavior modification, meaning when you are for example, training a dog to do certain things. You are modifying its way of thinking. You are modifying part of the essence of the conscious essence. I mean, just think about how all of us are having this process where we are trying to get rid of the programming. And now you think about how much programming we put into certain animals that are considered to be pets. Leave alone deciding for them when they are entitled or not to reproduce. Muting animals, all these different kind of things. So I think sometimes people are focalizing, and I know some people will come and tell me, oh, well, you shouldn't be eating animals, or other different things. Like, there are different degrees. The lion is going to eat, okay? And he's not going to go for the grass. He's not going to go for an apple. There is a balance in this universe, okay? There are what we call biodiversity, where each kingdom, each species is playing a specific part, and if one of them just derails something else, it can cause like a major havoc. There can be some destruction of a lot of biodiversity. So it is not a matter of saying, people are eating meat, they're not eating meat, and all that stuff, because in our African tradition, first of all, no one was eating meat every day. Okay, and even when there were communities that were hunters and gatherers and so forth and so on, people knew exactly when they are going to hunt, how much they are going to hunt, and at what season. So it's not something that was going all year around. It was something that was very specific, in line with also how the environment was going, the biodiversity, to maintain it that way. And it was part of the spirituality, because they were educated, they were taught about what to do, how to do it, and when to do it. And going hunting was like, you are risking your own life. So there was also there an exchange in terms of energy, in terms of hunters who are not coming back. So it wasn't something that was just like that was done for pleasure, or for the heck of having the head of a lion in your room, or anything like that. It was really something that was really part of a cycle, and the spirituality that emerged is a spirituality that's integrative. It's a spirituality that teaches you how to not dominate the environment, but work within it, to take your place in that space and be able to contribute to it, not abuse it, but play your part in it. And part of that is to respect the liberty of other animals, is to respect the way that it can come and go. Because we have, as I mentioned, there's many different African totem animal totems. Therefore, when you're capturing an animal, you don't know if that's someone else's totem. And things can come out of that as well. We've talked about fetishes a little bit. So fetishes also can guard certain area. They can also protect certain animals as well. So they can work with entities, and they can work with different aspects of their spirituality in order to have some impact in the physical world. So in that sense, I know I've gotten, and the reason why I made this video is because I've got a lot of questions about African animal totems, and people who have pets who have asked me this, and I said, the relationship that you have with your pet is not the same relationship that you can have with an animal totem. You're not going to be able to, lock your pet out, lock your animal totem outside just because you feel like it wasn't acting right or whatever, or because the animal peed in your bed, or because, if your animal wants to go home with a friend, you're not going to be say, it is my cat, or it is my dog, and go into a tantrum or anything like that. So it's really, really not the same type of relationship that you're having. And it's not a condescending relationship where you are, mimicking or anything like that. We don't see animal totems in terms of us being superior to them. We speak to them as we will speak to an ancestor, as we will speak to an individual. We will speak to them with the sacredness and the honor that they deserve. And I think when you do reap a lot of benefits from a relationship, you approach it with a type of sacredness that's very important. And in terms of searching and discovering what kind of animal totems, if you do have already some of them into your own family, I think meditation is the best tool of all. Now, if you're new to meditation, or you have certain blockages, there are different techniques that you can use in order to access that information as well. And part of it, one of the basic tools that you can use are different cards with animals on them, and see how often when you're pulling cards, how often certain animals come back. There are also books on animal spirits, which you can just flip and see what pages you open and what pages keep coming back. Those are just tools to help you kind of center and focus, but there's more concrete work that you can do in terms with meditative work, with dream work, in order to actually see and pinpoint an animal, and in order to try to rekindle that relationship if you have it already in your bloodline. Those are actually the easiest connection to reestablish. If you already had that in your bloodline with your one of your ancestors already established that, it's going to be easier for you to reconnect with it than if you want to establish a brand new relationship with an animal, because it would take you probably will need for your children to continue on and establish that, depending on how developed you already are. So I hope I answered some of these questions, and that you now have a little bit grounder perception on what animal totems are, and how you could not only discover yours, but have a different perspective in terms of when you're seeing an animal around, and how to think and treat them. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.